Here's my thoughts in a brief review of Tom Sweterlitz's The Gone World and why it didn't totally work for me, but it may have worked for you. So, this is a book that has some really cool science fiction ideas, but at the end of the day is more of a crime fiction story. And that's where it didn't fully meet my expectations because the premise and the setup of the early chapters sounds so cool. And the idea is a really cool idea. It's got a lot of the science fiction elements that I love. You have future sight, so a la prescience in the Dune series. You have this time traveling multiversal crew and a navy that can see into the future, sort of like a Minority Report. And then you have this Terminus, this end of the world cosmic dread. You've got a lot of really cool elements, and this is all wrapped around a crime investigation happening in the real world. That's the clash that I didn't totally love in the book is you've got these grand ideas that sort of take a backseat to the human element. And by contrast, that is what may work for a lot of other readers. It's a very grounded book that explores more of the human aspect than leaning into the science fiction, though it does sprinkle in these science fiction elements. And that was where I was most excited when we started learning about the mechanics of the world. So, what did this feel like to me was more in a good way the X-Files. So it did feel like an episode of classic X-Files that I grew up watching, of course, and I loved it, watching Mulder and Scully investigate here like a murder. So it's a mundane sort of event, but in the backdrop, the characters work for, yes, the secret Navy project to travel into deep space and to time travel and to see the future, to visit multiverses. So you've got this, like, yeah, these grand ideas, but the narrative is this murder mystery that our main character is trying to solve, and they used ideas like this future sight. So we do get to see that, which I think is very cool. And one of my favorite parts of the book is when our main character detective, she goes to an alternate future in space, all this cool stuff. And yes, the laws of the world are explained. So the author does a great job of establishing the rules and why we can't use the future stuff. So, like Minority Report, they can't convict based on just this possible future because it's a possible alternate multiverse. It's not the future that's set in stone, that's concrete going to happen. But you'd think, because we do see it here, that yes, they stake out these possible causes and they look into these things. You'd think they would sort of do this more and lean into that. But again, it brings it back to the characters and our core cast of characters, following up on this mystery of how this one murder happened and then how it ties into a larger conspiracy, which, yes, it also feels a lot. And I think the back of the book even says, like True Detective season one, which we watched. And I really enjoyed that because it is a regular investigative detective work story, but it does have, if you've seen True Detective or you've at least heard the buzz, yeah, this weird cosmic like mystery going on in the background. And that's sort of at play here in the Gone World because it has these elements which we're told about, which like True Detective we learn about eventually by the ending, but here we're told about these science fiction elements of the secret Navy project to travel to deep space and deep time. But it's again taken the backseat to the procedural, and it's very character driven. And you towards the end start to kind of see it all coalesce and go together, but never satisfying, at least for me, to lean into those science fiction elements. And I feel the ending was a bit jumbled. So that is another sort of negative to my review is how it all sort of combined at the end. Felt a little rushed once we're kind of at that climax point where all the other crew, I'm trying to be not too spoiler because yes, it's a detective story. So if you ruin the detective, then what's the reason of reading it? But when all those elements with the other crew and the ships and the rifts and the terminus and this all kind of coalesce at the end, it did feel like a breakneck, like speed run through the final elements. And it was a satisfying ending, but I guess again, it was expectations that didn't deliver to my personal science fiction aspirations of reading this book. Whereas I think this is a book that you could enjoy if you want a crime fiction story first with sci-fi elements second versus a pure science fiction story. Again, what I loved was these strong, cool science fiction ideas, and that was never fully realized. I think it was just more of a personal letdown of what exactly happened. The other comparison I would make this to is Blake Crouch's Dark Matter. So if you're a fan of Dark Matter, I feel this also deals with those science fiction elements in a similar way, but maybe even notching up the science even more. Whereas Dark Matter, it deals with, yes, this superpositioning time travel. It's the same concept here in Gone World, where there's like a superposition that they have to do in space, but there's like a superpositioning multiversal aspect, but they use it in a Minority Report way to see into the future, versus our characters in Dark Matter are sort of traveling to try and get back home and trying to come across yourself if you've read or watched the Apple TV series of Dark Matter. So it does have a lot of similarities to Dark Matter. So I think if you like Blake Crouch's Dark Matter, or Recursion to an extent, I liked Recursion a lot because it's like a slightly different take on memory. But if you like Dark Matter and multiversal alternate realities, this is kind of the story for you. So I think that is who this is ideally for. People that like crime fiction, or if you like Dark Matter a lot, you will probably enjoy The Gone World, because it is that more human grounded story with the science element in the background, like Dark Matter was. Versus if you're like me, I think I picked this up because it was recommended on a science fiction thread on Reddit. And I was like, yeah, that sounds, detective story with space and time travel and Minority Report and Dark Matter. Yeah, that sounds cool, but it ended up being a little more grounded. So I think I've said grounded and a little more. So if you haven't understood by now, yes, that's exactly what I thought of it. Why it didn't work for me, but it might work for you. So do check out Tom Sweterlich's The Gone World, and it maybe tickles your fancy for a crime fiction with sci-fi elements. I've said that a million times, so I've driven this point home. Thanks for watching, and do stick around for other videos on fantasy and sci-fi books. Talk to you later. See ya.